Hey everybody, welcome. All right. So how are y'all doing today? So I was just watching, so we're going to get started in just a sec with the instructional design learning live stuff. But for those of you that have been watching the Apple Apple Live event that just took place, so something cool I just wanted to talk about, which I'll talk about more in detail on Friday after I get more details. But they released Apple Watch 6, which I'm not super impressed by because it doesn't really do anything the other ones didn't, except SpO2 meter, which I had Garmin watches have done for 2 years. So, but they released Apple Fitness, which I've been talking about for like a month or two now. I've been saying Apple's going to release a fitness app that's going to compete with Peloton, and they've done it. It's going to be $9 a year, well, $9.99 a month, I mean, or 80 a year, something like that. I don't know. I'm going to get more details about it, but it looks like a fitness app that basically works with your Apple Watch, your iPhone, and is going to be a competitor to Peloton. So kind of cool, kind of exciting. As we get more details, I want to find out more about that. But for now, let's get into our instructional design stuff. Okay, so today what I want to talk about is the instructional needs analysis. Instructional analysis. Now, analysis is kind of funny because, all texts like go through all this information about the needs analysis and try to tell you all these things you have to do during it. And what's funny is in practice, a lot of times I do my needs analysis let me just give you an example. I just did a needs analysis in the last 2 weeks for a company that I'm going to be doing a project for. And I did the needs analysis in an hour meeting. That was it. Full needs analysis. So let's talk about what it is, how you do it, what it's supposed to do. So let me get in here and let's see. Let me just readjust my screen really quickly so you all can see exactly what I want to show you, because I want to show you my screen. I want to talk about needs analysis. I want to show you a little diagram. So let's see here. Let's do that and that and oops, I just did not I shrunk the wrong thing. I'm trying to shrink myself. Actually, do I even need to shrink myself? Yeah, I do need to shrink myself. Little bit, little shrink. There we go. I don't mind being nice and tiny. That's okay if I'm tiny. Okay, so what you're seeing up on the screen right now, perfect, all set. So what you're seeing up on the screen right now is basically the map of instructional design. I've shown this before. This is from my book. I don't need to go through this, but I just want to rehash. Remember, I've talked about like how people learn, and I'll get more into that when I start talking about design. But how people learn is you tell them about what you're gonna talk about, and then you refresh their memory. So I'm refreshing your memory. But basically, we start out instructional design. We have this performance analysis. Performance analysis is designed to determine if it's a training problem or not. So we're assuming it is. Once we know it's a training problem, we start the instructional design process. Here is where we choose a model. I talked about models last time. Basic models. We've got ADDIE is the framework for all of these models. We got Dick and Carey, Rapid Design, Keller Kemp, Assure, whatever model you want to use. Take your pick. There's a bazillion. But the thing is, all the models basically do the same exact thing 100% in practice. So when you practice the model, you're basically doing the same thing regardless of what the model's telling you to do, which is why I wrote my book the way I did, to tell you what you're supposed to do, what you need to collect, and the 30 different ways to collect it. So, all right, let's get into it. So we are at this place called analysis. This is what we're going to talk about today. So we selected our model. I don't care what model it is you selected, you're doing analysis. You have to, no matter what you select. In the analysis, you got to collect a few key pieces of information, and you have a few goals. So what we're doing is we are determining who are our learners, what is the context and environment like, what do they have versus what do they want? Like what is the problem and how are we going to solve it? That's our analysis. By the end of the analysis, my goal at the end of analysis is a project, either proposal to a client or I tell the person how I'm solving their training problem. Usually that includes a price, a timeline, and other information like that I'm going to give to a client and say, this is how much this is going to cost. This is how long it's going to take. Here's exactly how we're going to solve your problem. That's the goal of the analysis, to determine that stuff. All right, let's talk about how we do it. Let me just get in here a little bit. We're scrolling through front-end analysis. We are going to get to actual instructional design. This is where I talk about the many ID models. Analysis. This needs analysis. So let's see, let me just scroll down here a little bit. I'm going to scroll to the end of this section, actually. We are going to talk about all the components of the analysis. Now it'll be the end of here. We are going to talk about task analysis a little bit. Let's get there. Oh, where am I trying to go? Where? Oh, here we go. Right here. Let me just highlight this. Oh, it's on 2 pages, of course. Okay, so when I'm doing my needs analysis, what I do is I am going to meet with my client. And by meet with my client, this is usually the unpaid part of my project. As a consultant, I'm doing this at the unpaid part. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm usually trying to get the work. Now, if I worked for a company and I was doing an analysis with a unit within the company, obviously that's a little different. I'm getting paid. But I come at a lot of things as the consultant because usually it's much easier coming in from the company's perspective. So coming in as the consultant, so a little more difficult. So when I meet with that client, sometimes I only have a 30 to 60 minute conversation with them, as I just had with my last client. We had a 60-minute conversation. I had to present them a proposed project proposal. So I'm looking for some key pieces of information. I'm looking for, and you can see right here what I actually write for them, which I'll talk about in a sec. I am looking for, so I need to figure out the scope of their project. Like, what is their problem? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to develop a computer-based training module? Are they trying to develop a course? What is the real problem? So what is their goal? So what do they have? So I do this thing called a gap analysis. Let's scroll up to gap analysis here. I am looking at what do they have versus what do they want, and then I'll come up with a recommendation for them. Now, while I'm doing this, you have to be experienced in instructional design to do this part, because sometimes they're not necessarily sure what they want. For example, the client that I'm working for right now, they didn't realize what they wanted. They also needed an LMS for, and they didn't really realize that because a lot of clients don't know what that kind of stuff is. So you have to be able to tell them why you're searching for their needs and realize like, oh, they don't have this tech, but they're going to want this. So you're going to have to recommend that kind of stuff as well. So it's a little tricky when you're talking to the client. I know instructional designers sometimes will just go in and they kind of have a solution already without talking to a client. Like they only work in X software and that's it. I personally like to go in and I like to see, well, what does my client really want? What are they asking for? And it's tricky because sometimes a client, they have this idea in their mind and you need to figure out what that idea is. And I use words like training, but training to me as an instructional designer isn't necessarily training to my client. I'll give you another example of a project. I was working on this project and the client wanted us to create a bunch of videos for them that would teach their learners how to use a piece of software. Well, after my meetings with them, I came to find out that they really didn't want training. They wanted just a bunch of how-to type YouTube videos that would walk someone through really quick. They didn't want any interaction. They didn't want knowledge checks and nothing that involved training. They wanted a quick 30-second how-to video. So you have to find out, what does the client, what do they have? Do they have, is it a new piece of software they're trying to, so what are we designing training on? Do they have the content or not? Where am I getting this content from? And what do they really need? What kind of computer system? Because if I'm developing e-learning, I need to make sure it's really e-learning that they want and not just like how-tos. I need to really figure out what they want in depth. What I'm building right now is I'm actually building a real course for a client, which is a little different because usually it is always e-learning, but not always as I'm telling you my current project is a course. And actually, I'm also, for another client, I'm developing a game. So you develop different things for different clients, but you have to find out what it is. So the current state, desired state, and then I'm going to come up with a solution for them. Now, in that time, I mentioned earlier, I talked about learner analysis and context analysis. Learner analysis are, who are my learners? Who are the people that need to be trained? What is their education level? What kind of environment do they train in? It's usually, more often than not, we're training some kind of soft skill. Person is like college educated, can read at basic level, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty easy. But sometimes that's not the case. I've done training on both ends of the spectrum where I've trained people who are, I was doing a project for a metro system one time, and I had to train the railroad workers. And these were guys who had been working there for 40 years and probably had never used a computer before, literally like working in tunnels. And then I've done projects where I'm training like surgeons who have literally don't have the time to take the project at all. So you have to consider that kind of stuff when you're thinking about who your learners are, what is their level. Next thing you figure is that context. That's part of this gap analysis too, the context. And that is, what do they have? Do they have a computer system? Do they have some kind of learning management system? Do they have a network, internet, website, whatever it is? And then what software do they have? Because if I'm thinking, like, if they're mentioning e-learning modules to me, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I could develop this in Articulate or Captivate, but does my client have a copy of Articulate or Captivate or Camtasia or whatever it is I'm using? Because if they don't have a copy of it, I need to, that's another thing I'm putting in my budget, because they need a copy so that they can edit it. And then do I need to train one of them how to use it? So I'm thinking about all this stuff. During a 60-minute conversation, I'm thinking about all this stuff. Because by the end of the 60-minute conversation, I need to create a proposal, which I'll go through at the end here, which I had up on the screen before. All right, so as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, okay, what is my solution? What's my solution? How much is this going to cost? How much is this going to cost? Coming up with these scenarios in my head as I talk to them. So I'm probing them with questions to find out all of this information. Those are the basic pieces. Who are the learners? What is the context? If I can get a budget number about what they're looking for. Really, I'm also trying to find out a lot about their technology. What do they want? Do they mention words like narration? Do they mention words like video? Because those are things that increase cost exponentially. So I've got to start to determine what tech do they want me to use. And I have to be thinking in my head, like, okay, so if they're thinking e-learning, that probably means video. So I got to start asking them a few questions about video. If they start talking about I always try to show them a few examples of things, but if they're talking course, okay, do they need a learning management system? Do they have this? What are all the components that go into a course? So I start to ask them as I get deeper into like this, I don't want to say rabbit hole, because I know where I'm going. But I refine my questions as I figure out their problem during this 60-minute conversation with them to get more and more specific so that I can come up with a recommendation for them. So we do this gap analysis. I figure out what's the current state? What am I going to recommend? But in doing that as well, one of the things that's really tricky about projects is people ask me, how do you determine how much time it's going to take you to develop something? And that's where your estimate of time and budget go right out the window in this place called the task analysis. So let me talk about why. So in this 60-minute conversation with the client, I can't do this step. I cannot do task analysis. What task analysis is a breakdown of all of their content so that I can see what the content is, all the objectives, and see it organized so that I can really see the layout of what this is going to look like. I can't do it in 60-minute conversation. In fact, this takes me a couple 60-minute conversations and probably them sending me tons of documents and stuff, and probably about 20 hours of work for me to develop this task analysis for them. So I'm not doing that for free either. So this is where the tricky part comes in. So what you have to do, and I'll talk about task analysis, how you do it in a second. But what you have to do here, since you can't do this during those quick conversations with your clients, You need to, in your head, do estimates to figure out what they want. So the first rule I will always tell you is the client will always underestimate what they need. What that means is if a client comes to me and tells me they need a 1 hour long training, they're not telling you the correct thing. They probably need like a 3 hour training. Now, if it's like a government mandate where it has to be 1 hour kind of thing, okay, it's going to be 1 hour. But if a client comes to you and says, we need, and I say, well, how long do you think it's going to take to get through the training? And they say, oh, about an hour. That probably means 2 to 3 hours. So assume that. Always over budget like that, because what happens is the client doesn't know, again, what training is. They picture, when they say 1 hour, that means it takes 1 hour to get through the whole thing. Like the software they're using. It would take them an hour to talk me through it. But that's not training. That's showing me how to do it. We didn't talk about all the places you pause, all the repetition to get someone to memorize, all the strategies that I use to get someone to memorize, all the knowledge checks, all the little activities they're going to do, which is going to double about 2.5 times the size of that hour-long training. So they didn't think of that when they told you that. So always make sure to explain that to the client too, so that they realize where you're getting your time estimate from, so that they understand, and show them some examples of that. It's one of the biggest lessons I learned early on, is that a client is really bad at estimating how long it's going to take. They are really good at underestimating, terrible overestimating. So that's your job. And I'll talk a little bit more about coming up with that number, that budget, when I get to the end here about some of the stuff that I do. Okay, so we get this task analysis. So what is task analysis? So assuming I can do it or can't do it, regardless. So if I get the proposal, or I am working internally, and right now with my current project, I got the proposal. This is next step right here. So let's talk about what this is, because so many people get confused about what a task analysis is. And a task analysis is so simple. And I think books just do the worst time of describing how basic this is. We try to describe all these different kinds of task analysis and blah, blah, blah. And all you're doing is writing down all the tasks that the client needs for the training. That's it. Step by step. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It does not need to be complicated. If I'm teaching someone how to tie their shoe, step 1, step 2, step 1, have a shoe, identify what a shoe is. Step 2, identify the laces. Step 3, form the bunny ears. Step 4, loop it around. Step 5, that's it. That's task analysis. Breaking down every single task the trainer, the end user, will have to do to complete this training. That's it. That's what task analysis is. It's not complicated. It's breaking down all the steps. Now remember, when I talked about like tying a shoe, I started with identify a shoe, identify laces, maybe lace the shoe up. Do I need to teach that stuff? I don't know. I find that out from the client. Sometimes I need to go that far, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I can start with, well, they know what the shoe is. They know the basics. Okay, we start at laces then. But you have to realize that stuff from your clients. Okay. Once I get all the tasks from my client, I do a couple things. I give them, and how important is it that the learners know this? And how difficult is it to teach the learners this? How long will it take me to teach the learners? And how costly is it? So like my current project, I've given them a cost that I think that the project's going to cost, but I'm billing them out hourly because it's too much. As soon as someone gets past a very simple, small, like $10,000 project, it's hourly billing, because I don't want to take the chance that they've underestimated too much. And I don't want to give them this huge number of the overestimation that it could potentially cost. So what I usually do is I give them a fixed cost, a sample fixed cost, say, I think it's going to cost around this much. Unless we do XYZ, it's going to go up to here. If we don't do XYZ, it might be down here. It's going to take about this many hours to get X done. And that's what I tell them. Okay, but I get this task analysis. The reason I do this to each one of these tasks is because sometimes what we find out is something's not very important and it's really difficult to teach. It's going to take a lot of time and cost a lot of money, and we might scrap it, or we might do it for the next round if we're like in a rush to get things out. It's a good way to kind of organize that content. It's one of the things I love about task analysis. But task analysis is so simple. We make it so complicated. For example, in my book, I have the brushing your teeth example. 1.0, put toothpaste on the brush, open toothpaste cap, take seal of toothpaste, Very simple. We're breaking down the task. That's all task analysis is. It does not need to be hard. I think most texts do a terrible, and explanations on the internet do a terrible job of explaining this. Why they have to make something so simple, so difficult, is beyond me. Instructional design itself is simple. It's a simple process. We made it so challenging, which is just beyond me that we've done that. Here's an example picture of a task analysis. We have our goal and the steps to complete it. If there are any questions about this stuff, ask me. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're at 20 minutes already. Jeez. Didn't realize I talk so much. I really talk sometimes once I'm on a roll. Okay. So let's talk about what I actually do when I am, what's the end of my analysis. Now, I told you two things. So first of all, I said when I'm doing a consulting project, I never can do that task analysis as part of my analysis. I have to do that after I've told the client how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. If I'm doing a consulting project, I mean, an internal project for a client, the task analysis is part of that analysis. So one of the things that hey, somebody said hi. So, hey, how you doing? One of the things that I do is so while I can't do the full task analysis in that 60-minute conversation, I do ask them probing questions about length. How long does this take you to go through? What kind of length are you thinking this is going to be? How much content is there? Do you have any of the content? Can I see any of the content? I ask those kind of probing questions just to get a sample. My current project is more about, they want it to be a course, like a college course, so it's going to be more like weekly, and that helps me estimate because I know what students and graduate level students can handle. So it's easy for me to say, okay, they're probably going to be about 3 hours of content per week. Maybe between like 2 and 4 hours per week, depending on the week. Some weeks more, some weeks less. So I have an idea of the content that it's going to take to develop. I don't necessarily need to see it, but I try to probe them for those kind of questions. As I've said, a lot of times I only have one meeting with the client and I have to write this proposal. So what does that proposal look like? I'm not going to show you a proposal. I'm not going to pull it up because I don't want to, I can't show you like what my clients asked for. I guess I could make one dummy-ish and take out names and stuff. And I think I have a dummy one that I probably could show you, but I'm not going to search for it right this second. But so the first thing that I have in but I have it broken down right here, exactly what it is. I don't even need to show you. I have it. I'll tell you. The first thing I have is a summary of the case. I say, who's the client? Who's the company? Why do I have that? My client knows who they are. But you know what it does? It shows my client that I understand who they are. It shows them that I've also researched them. And this is who they are. This is what their problem, and I say, what's the problem? I identify the problem. Here is what the problem is. Here is what your problem is. Here is how I'm going to solve it. I say, we estimate this project is going to cost X amount with a little like parenthesis next to that saying explanation down below. Same thing with the schedule and project deadline. So this is a very simple paragraph where I give them a lot of information. The reason I do that is because sometimes what I don't want to have happen is, just think about like your resume. When you're writing a resume, if you wrote like an 8-page resume and gave it to someone, could you expect them to really quickly find all the information in it? No, you can't, which is why most people only have a 1 or 2-page resume. But when you're writing a analysis document like this or a proposal to a client, it needs to be longer. It's going to be like a minimum of 5 to way more pages than that. So I have to consider that when I'm writing this proposal to my client. So I write that first quick like paragraph, which might even be like some bullet points, just so if one of the people on their team can only glance at this really quick, they have all the basic information right there, and then they can find all the details in the document. So I always make sure that I do that. I don't know if it's actually gotten me a project versus not anytime, but I feel like me talking to my client is what gets me my projects. That my proposal is secondary because they either want me for my qualifications and experience or they just don't. So I feel like my proposal's secondary, but I still take pride and make sure that I'm doing it correctly. All right. I give them the results of the gap analysis. I discuss, here's what you want. Here's what you currently have. Here's what you want. Here's what I recommend. Sometimes I will give them a few options. And by options, what I usually do is I'll say, like, here's what I recommend that we do. If you want, let me just give you an example. I'm going to develop an hour-long training for you. If you would like videos in the training, each 30-second or 60-second video might cost $1,000. So I'll add that in, and that way they can pick and choose like a la carte to say what they want. And I give an explanation, like, do you want narration? Do you want video? And some people are like, well, why does narration cost like $500 an hour? Well, no, it's not what it costs. It actually costs like $500 for like 20 minutes. Why does narration cost that much? Well, because I'm not doing the narration myself. I'm actually hiring a person who has a studio, professional recording studio with a professional level microphone. Now, I do have a Yeti mic, which is nice and good, but like if I'm doing a project for Amazon and delivering this to 50,000 people, I'm going to use a professional recording studio, and it's going to cost some money. And the same thing with our cameras. Like, I do have some professional camera, but like I'm not out there shooting video scenes and hiring actors and stuff. I hire a production company to shoot my video for me, and it is costly. So you have to explain to the clients that when you want something done professionally, you either do it, buy once, cry once. I won't give them bad quality content. So I talk about that in the gap analysis, but sometimes I will present like 2 scenarios for them or 3, but usually I know the client enough after a few emails and a conversation to tell what they want. And I can give them some extra like bonus a la carte options, like a Beyond video would like go animate, like an animation video, a video, narration, all that kinds of cool stuff that they can add in. Then I'll talk about like who, this is where we talk about their learners and their context. Do I recommend an LMS? If so, like anything that they need for this project, I will say, you need a, what tech? Do you need an LMS? Here's the LMS I recommend. Here's how much it's going to cost you. Here's the software that we're going to develop this in. Here's you need to buy copies of that for yourself. Here's how much that's going to cost, because they need to be able to edit unless they're going to continue to come back to me to edit. Here's how much it's going to cost me per hour to edit after we're done with this project. Then we talk about, okay, we get to the project solution and our goals. Project solution, here's how we're going to solve this problem. Here's the exact output. Here are the deliverables you are going to get. Then what I do is I have a timeline and schedule, and I break down each of the deliverables and show them how long it's going to take to develop them. Now, usually what I do with a client, they don't always have an end date in mind. So what I do is I'll say like needs analysis, it's going to take me 20 hours. Task analysis 20 hours, rather than say like task analysis will be done next Monday. I give them hourly, so that way what they can do, it's because at the end I show them the hours versus how much I cost, and to show them the cost of the project. I break down every single deliverable, how long each deliverable is going to cost. I describe each deliverable as much as I can so that they completely understand what they're getting. And then I have a sign off at the end. And the way that I charge clients is I usually, depending on the cost and scope, I might have them pay up front, not for the whole project, but a third. I might do like a third 50% through, and the last third at completion of the project. Sometimes what I'll do, if it's a smaller budget project, I'll do pay at 50%, pay the other 50% at the end. It depends on the scope too. Like if they want video or narration or anything that I need to hire an external company to help me with, they have to pay for that up front, because I'm not just floating that money to that company. So I do things like that, but you have to break down your budget pretty in depth. You have to tell them this is how many hours each of these deliverables is going to take. This is why it's going to take each of this amount of hours. And you have to tell them what the rate is. I do not like fixed costs for big projects. If it's like a $5,000 project, I'm going to say 5,000 or 1,000 or 10,000. But if it's like a 15, 20, $25,000 plus project, I'm going to break it down hourly and I'm going to charge them an hourly rate. Um, I just, personally do not like that fixed cost model in that. I mean, I'll tell them this is what I think it's going to cost you, but give or take a couple grand, depending on what happens. That helps me with scope creep. If they decide to add more stuff to the project as we go through, fine, it's going to take more hours. I'm going to charge more money. That's fine with me. The longer you want to take, I'll just keep making money from it. Stuff like that. So that's the basic of analysis. That's the end goal. And it's really interesting that the iffy thing is the task analysis, some instructional designers consider that analysis and some start it in design. It's really an analysis that you do after you get your goals. Like, what are the project goals? I can do my task analysis. It is part of analysis, but I don't do it as part of a proposal because I can't. I do it after. So like right now, I just did a proposal for a client. I'm going to start the task analysis this week. So that's like step one. If I was working internally, the task analysis would be part of my analysis. Whatever. We get so caught up in these terms and when things are done. And look, this is what you got to do to complete a project. It doesn't matter what instructional design model I'm using. It doesn't matter what someone wants to call it in a text or in research or whatever. Here's what I have to do to complete this project for clients in real time and to make them happy and give them quality work. So, and that's the way I tried to write my book. I hope I did a good job of that. I'm going to go through my book and rewrite. I'm going to put a version 2 out next summer. I don't know if I'll continue to do versions each year, but there's already a couple things I want to add. I want to add some more about learning and how people learn in that design section to add some stuff that I think will help instructional designers teach better and get people to really learn what they're doing. There's a big component that I think is missing from a lot of stuff that I didn't put in my book because I just didn't have time, but I will put in version 2. So there'll probably be like 2 more chapters in version 2 of my book when I do put it out this next summer. But yeah, my book is free, so it shouldn't matter to most of you. And even if you buy it, it's like $10 on Amazon for the hard copy, if you prefer a hard copy. And if you did read it, if you do use my book and read it, you should definitely give me a review on Amazon because that helps me. It looks better for me and stuff. And you got it for free, so, little trade there, free book for review kind of thing. Any questions about analysis? That's the gist of it. I'm probably missing some stuff that I could have talked about here, but that's the basic of analysis stuff. It's super important. You got to get it right. If you mess up analysis, man, your project is doomed from the start. And that's why I say, like, these models, like what you pick, like people are talking about agile and rapid design or whatever. You know what? You're still doing this analysis, and I don't care if you pick Dick and Carey. I don't care if you pick Assure. I don't care what model you picked. You're doing an analysis. You probably have like 60 to like 2 to 3 meetings, maybe 1 meeting to do it. That's it. No matter what the book says, realistically, this is how it works. As I just said, I just did an analysis in a 60-minute phone conversation with a client. So that's pretty typical. I'd say that's pretty much about how it always works. So any questions, y'all? Anyone have any questions for me? Oh, sorry. I'm like banging my pen, and I realize that does come through the microphone. You can tell me, like, stop banging your pen. That's annoying if you hear that stuff while I'm doing these videos ever. Because I'm doing it live, so, like, when I do stuff live, like, I totally don't get to edit it. So I don't get to go through and take out all the bad stuff when I, like, messed up. Not that I ever mess up in a video. As I like burp or something. Anything? Any questions? No questions? Y'all got task analysis good? Everyone's got it? or you're just coming back to watch this video later, that's cool. Send me a question in the comment section. Just post a question or whatever. I'm pretty good about my comments on YouTube. I check them at least every morning and sometimes at night too if I'm getting a bunch, because I get notifications right on my phone, so I'll respond pretty quick. But yeah, that's it, everyone. Let's see here. Oh, I hid myself. No. Hide that. Oh yeah, I made my background a little too small. There we go. Oh my god, goodness. I swear. I cannot select the right thing ever. There we go. Make myself big again. That's going to be it, everyone. There are no more questions, so that is it for today. I enjoyed chatting with you guys, and I will be doing another instructional design video in, oh my goodness, doing another instructional design video in 2 weeks. And next week I'll be doing another esports one, so I'm doing this rotation. And I'm eventually going to start making all my videos my interviews, my reflection, my learning life. I think I'm going to figure out how to make them all like one thing instead of 3 separate ones. But anyway.